It was a bright, sunny afternoon in a little town called Oakville. The sun was shining high in the sky, making everything look warm and golden. Oakville wasn't a big place, just a small, dusty spot with a few streets, some old houses, and one tiny store at the corner. The roads were made of dirt and gravel, and when the wind blew, little clouds of dust danced around. Everyone in Oakville knew each other. They waved hello, shared stories, and helped out when someone needed a hand. It was that kind of town, cozy, friendly, and quiet most days. But there was one person who didn't quite fit in yet, Sarah Miller. Sarah was new. She had only moved to Oakville a few weeks ago, and most people didn't know much about her. She lived in a small house at the edge of town, with a little porch and a patchy yard. The neighbors saw her sometimes, but they didn't talk to her a lot. Sarah was different, you see. She couldn't see. She was blind. Her eyes didn't work like everyone else's, so she had to find her way around in her own special way. Sometimes she used a long, white cane to tap the ground in front of her. It made little clicking sounds as she walked, tap, 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 feeling for bumps or steps. But most of the time, she didn't need the cane. She had something better, her guide dog, Rusty. Rusty was a big dog, a German shepherd with thick, shiny fur that looked like a mix of black and brown. His coat sparkled a little in the sunlight, and his ears stood up tall, always listening. He had calm, brown eyes that seemed to look right through you. When he walked next to Sarah, his head was high, and his steps were steady. People in Oakville saw Rusty and thought, "Oh, what a nice dog. He must be so sweet, helping Sarah like that." They'd smile and wave, thinking he was just a regular helper dog. But here's the thing, Rusty wasn't just any dog. He was special, way more special than anyone in town could guess. Oh boy, were they wrong about him. Sarah liked to keep to herself. She wasn't loud or chatty like some folks in Oakville. She didn't go to the town picnics or sit at the store chatting with the old men who played cards there. Instead, she stayed quiet. She'd walk down the dusty sidewalks with Rusty by her side, her shoes crunching on the gravel. Tap, tap, tap went her cane when she used it, or just the soft patting of Rusty's paws when he led the way. She wore simple clothes, usually a blue dress or a comfy sweater, and her hair was tied back in a ponytail. She looked like any other lady, except for her eyes. They didn't move around or look at things. They just stayed still, like she was always listening instead of seeing. The people in Oakville didn't bother her much. Some said, "She's shy," or "She's new, give her time." Others didn't even notice her. To them, Sarah was just the quiet blind lady with the big dog. They didn't think she was anyone important. They didn't wonder about her story or where she came from. They just let her be. And that was fine with Sarah. She didn't need a lot of friends or big hellos. She had Rusty, and that was enough for her. But not everyone in Oakville was nice. There was a group of people who weren't quiet or friendly at all. They were loud, really loud, and they didn't care who they bothered. They were a bunch of bikers, tough guys who rode big, noisy motorcycles. Every weekend, they'd come roaring into town like a storm. Their bikes made a sound like thunder, vroom, 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 and the ground shook a little when they sped by. They called themselves the Iron Vipers. Cool name, right? But they weren't cool people. They were rough and mean, and they liked causing trouble. The Iron Vipers wore black leather jackets with a picture of a snake on the back. The snake had sharp teeth and twisty coils, and it looked scary. The bikers liked that. They wanted people to be afraid of them. They had messy hair and scruffy beards, and some had tattoos on their arms, pictures of skulls or flames. Their boots were big and clumpy, and when they walked, you could hear them coming from far away. They'd park their bikes in the middle of town, near the store or the gas station, and laugh loud enough for everyone to hear. They acted like Oakville belonged to them, like they were the bosses of everything. Most folks in town stayed away from the Iron Vipers. The old men at the store would stop their card games and go inside when the bikers showed up. Kids riding bikes would pedal home fast, not wanting to get in their way. Even the dogs in town, the little ones that barked at squirrels, would run and hide when they heard those engines. The Iron Vipers liked that. They liked being big and loud and scary. It made them feel strong. And then they saw Sarah. To them, she wasn't just the quiet blind lady. She was something else, an easy target. See, the bikers didn't pick on people who could fight back. They didn't mess with the big farmers with strong arms or the tough guys who worked at the gas station. No, they picked on people they thought were weak. And Sarah? With her cane and her calm face, she looked weak to them. They didn't know anything about her or about Rusty. They just saw a lady who couldn't see, walking slow with her dog, and they thought, oh, this will be fun. It started small. One day, Sarah was walking down the street, Rusty by her side. The sun was warm, and she was headed to the store to get some bread and milk. Her bag hung on her arm, swinging a little as she moved. Rusty's tail wagged just a tiny bit. He liked walks. Everything was peaceful. Then, out of nowhere, the roar of engines filled the air. The iron vipers rolled in, their bikes kicking up dust. One of them, a skinny guy with a loud laugh, spotted Sarah. He slowed down his bike and shouted, "Yo, blind lady. What's a girl like you doing out here all alone?" His voice was mean, like he was teasing her on purpose. The other bikers laughed, their chuckles mixing with the rumble of their engines. Sarah didn't say anything. She didn't even turn her head. She just kept walking, one step at a time, her face as calm as a still pond. Rusty stayed close, his big paws pressing into the dirt. His ears twitched a little, like he heard every word, but he didn't bark or growl. He just kept walking too. The biker revved his engine vroom, making it extra loud, like he wanted to scare her. Dust flew up around Sarah, but she didn't flinch. She didn't jump or yell. She just kept going, slow and steady. The bikers laughed again, thinking they'd won something. "Look at her," the skinny one said. "Too scared to talk." They rode off, their tires spinning, leaving a cloud of dirt behind. Sarah didn't look scared. She didn't look mad either. Her face stayed smooth and quiet, like nothing happened. But inside. Oh, she heard them. She heard every word, every laugh, every squeaky rev of those bikes. And Rusty? He heard it too. His calm brown eyes flicked toward the bikers for just a second, then back to the path ahead. He didn't bark. He didn't chase. He just stayed by Sarah, doing his job. The bikers didn't know it yet, but they'd made a big mistake. They thought Sarah was weak. They thought Rusty was just a fluffy pet. They were wrong, so wrong. They were poking a bear they shouldn't have messed with, and soon, they'd find out why. So, what do you think so far? Pretty wild, huh? Ever met someone who looked weak but turned out to be super strong? Drop your thoughts below, I'd love to hear. And if you're liking this, stick around, cause it's about to get even better. The Iron Vipers didn't stop after that first mean shout. Oh no, they didn't just tease Sarah one time and call it a day. Nope, they turned it into a game, a big, loud, annoying game. Every Saturday, when the sun was up and the weekend started, those bikers would roll into Oakville on their noisy motorcycles. Vroom, vroom, vroom. The sound bounced off the houses and shook the windows. They'd zoom down the dusty streets, looking for trouble, and guess who they always found? Sarah. See, Sarah liked her routine. She didn't have a fancy life, but she had things she did every day. Sometimes she'd walk to the corner store, a little shop with a red sign and a bell that jingled when you opened the door. She'd go there to buy stuff like bread, milk, or maybe a candy bar if she felt like a treat. Other times, she'd just sit on her porch, rocking in an old wooden chair that creaked a little. She'd listen to the birds chirping or the wind rustling the trees. Rusty, her big German shepherd, would lie down next to her, his head resting on his paws. It was peaceful until the Iron Vipers showed up. Every Saturday, like clockwork, they'd spot her. If she was walking to the store, they'd see her tapping along with her cane or holding Rusty's harness. If she was on her porch, they'd notice her sitting there, quiet and still. And then the game would start. They'd rev their engines extra loud, vroom, and circle around her like a pack of wolves. Their big, shiny bikes kicked up clouds of dust that floated in the air. They'd yell dumb stuff, trying to make her mad or scared. "Hey, lady, where's your babysitter?" one would shout, laughing so hard he'd almost fall off his bike. "That mutt of yours gonna fetch me a beer," another would holler, pointing at Rusty like he was some kind of clown. They thought they were so funny. They'd laugh and laugh, slapping each other on the back, their voices loud and rough. To them, Sarah was just a toy, someone they could pick on because she couldn't see them coming. They didn't care that she was minding her own business. They didn't care that she never bothered anybody. They just saw a blind lady with a dog, and they thought, easy peasy. Let's mess with her. But Sarah? She didn't play along. She didn't yell back or wave her fists or tell them to go away. She stayed quiet, super quiet. When they shouted those mean things, she'd just grip Rusty's harness a little tighter. Her fingers would squeeze the leather handle, but her face didn't change. No frowns, no tears, no shouting. She'd keep walking if she was on the street, her shoes crunching on the gravel, step by step. Or if she was on her porch, she'd keep rocking in her chair, slow and steady, like nothing was wrong. Rusty stayed calm too. He'd walk right next to her, his big paws padding along, or he'd lift his head from the porch floor and look at the bikers with those deep brown eyes. But he didn't bark. He didn't growl, not loud, anyway. He just watched. The townsfolk saw it all happen. Oakville was small, so nothing stayed secret for long. People would peek out their windows or stand on their porches, watching the iron vipers circle Sarah. They'd see the dust clouds and hear the engines roaring and the bikers laughing. Some folks shook their heads and muttered to each other. Poor Sarah, they'd say. Those guys are trouble. Others would whisper, she's tough, though. She doesn't even blink. A few even said, she'll be fine. She's got that dog. But most people didn't do anything. They didn't run out and yell at the bikers to stop. They didn't call for help or march over to Sarah's house to check on her. Why? Because they were scared. The iron vipers weren't just loud, they were mean. They had those big boots and tough faces, and everyone knew they liked fights. The old men at the store would shuffle inside when the bikers came. The kids riding bikes would zoom away fast. Even the little dogs that chased squirrels would hide under porches when they heard those engines. Nobody wanted to mess with the iron vipers. So they watched Sarah deal with it, and they stayed quiet. Inside, though, Sarah wasn't quiet. Not in her heart. Sure, her face looked calm, and her steps didn't waver, but deep down, she was mad, really, really mad. Every time those bikers shouted at her, every time they laughed and called her names, it was like throwing wood on a fire. The flames inside her grew bigger and hotter, but she didn't let it show. She kept it locked up tight, like a secret. She wasn't just tough, she was boiling. She heard every word they said. She felt the dust they kicked up sting her skin. She knew they thought she was weak, and that made her even madder. But she didn't say a peep. Not yet. And Rusty? Oh, Rusty wasn't just some regular dog. The bikers looked at him and saw a big, fluffy pet with a harness, a helper dog who probably just wagged his tail and licked faces. They had no idea. Rusty didn't bark or jump at them, so they thought he was nothing special. Look at that mutt, they'd yell, chuckling like fools. He's too lazy to even growl. But Rusty wasn't lazy. He wasn't weak. He was watching them, watching every move they made. His ears would twitch a little when they shouted. His eyes would follow their bikes as they zoomed around. He stayed quiet, but he was ready. Those bikers had no clue what was coming their way. It kept going like that for weeks. Every Saturday, the Iron Vipers would find Sarah and start their game. They'd circle her, yell their dumb jokes, and laugh like it was the best fun ever. One time, they got even louder. They revved their engines so hard the noise hurt Sarah's ears. She didn't flinch, though. She just kept walking, her hand on Rusty's harness. Another time, they threw an empty soda can near her feet, trying to make her trip. It clattered on the ground, rolling in the dirt. Sarah stepped right over it, calm as could be, and Rusty didn't even look at it. The bikers howled with laughter, thinking they were so clever. But then one day, things got worse. The leader of the Iron Vipers, a big guy named Spike, decided he wanted more fun. Spike was the toughest of the bunch. He was tall and wide, like a bear standing on two legs. His beard was scruffy and wild, full of tangles, and his eyes were small and mean. He wore a black leather jacket with the snake picture on it, and his boots were so big they left deep prints in the dirt. Spike didn't just laugh at Sarah, he wanted to push her, to see if she'd break. That day, Sarah was walking home from the store. She had a little bag with some apples and a loaf of bread hanging from her arm. Rusty was by her side, his tail wagging just a tiny bit. The sun was starting to go down, painting the sky orange and pink. It was quiet until Spike and his crew roared in. They spotted Sarah and grinned. Spike pulled his bike right in front of her, blocking her path. The engine growled as he turned it off, and he hopped down, his boots thumping loud on the ground. He leaned in too close and smirked. "What's the matter, sweetheart?" he said, his voice all rough and teasing. "Too scared to talk? Or maybe you're just lost without your little puppy." He laughed, a big, nasty laugh that made the other bikers join in. Then he did something bold, something dumb. He reached out with his big, dirty hand, like he was gonna pat Rusty's head. "Nice doggy," he said, still chuckling. "Big mistake. Huge mistake." Rusty's eyes snapped up to Spike. Those calm brown eyes turned sharp, like knives. A low growl rumbled in his throat, super quiet, so quiet Spike didn't even hear it over his own laughing. The sound was deep, like a storm brewing far away. Rusty didn't move, didn't lunge, didn't bark. He just stared at Spike, his body stiff and ready. Sarah felt it. She felt Rusty's harness pull a tiny bit tighter. She didn't say anything, but a little smirk crept onto her face. Just a small one, like she knew something Spike didn't. Spike pulled his hand back, still laughing, clueless as ever. "What a wimp of a dog," he said, turning to his buddies. They all cracked up, thinking they'd won again. But they hadn't won. They didn't know it yet, but they just lit a match and the fire was about to burn bright. Weeks went by in Oakville, and things didn't get better for Sarah. Nope, they got worse, way worse. The Iron Vipers, those loud bikers with their big motorcycles, didn't stop picking on her. They didn't get bored or find someone else to tease. Instead, they got meaner, like bullies who keep poking you just to see if you'll cry. Every Saturday, when the sun was up and the town was buzzing with weekend stuff, they'd come roaring in. Vroom, vroom, vroom. Their engines shook the air, and their tires kicked up dust that made everyone cough. They'd look for Sarah, and when they found her, the trouble started all over again. At first, it was just yelling. They'd shout dumb things like, "Hey, blind lady, where you going?" or "Need help crossing the street." They'd laugh and laugh, thinking they were so funny. But after a while, that wasn't enough for them. They wanted to do more. They wanted to push Sarah harder, to see if she'd get mad or scared. So they started playing new tricks, mean, sneaky tricks that made Sarah's days tougher. One of their favorite things was tossing soda cans. They'd drink their fizzy drinks, cola or orange soda, and when the cans were empty, they wouldn't throw them in the trash. Nope. They'd wait until Sarah was walking by, her shoes crunching on the gravel, Rusty by her side. Then one of them, usually a skinny guy with greasy hair, would chuck the can right near her feet. Clank. It hit the ground and roll, bouncing around like a little metal toy. They hoped she'd trip over it or stumble, since she couldn't see where it landed. "Oops," they'd yell, pretending it was an accident. "Watch out, lady." Then they'd crack up, their laughs loud and nasty. But Sarah didn't trip. She didn't fall or stumble or cry out. She stayed cool, super cool, like ice on a hot day. She'd hear the can hit the ground, and she'd pause for just a second, her head tilting a tiny bit. Then she'd keep walking, stepping right over it like it was nothing. Rusty helped too. His big paws would guide her around the can, his nose twitching like he knew exactly where it was. The bikers didn't scare her. They didn't win. And that made them try harder. Another thing they did was rev their engines really loud. They'd see Sarah walking to the corner store or coming back with a little bag of groceries, and they'd zoom up close. Vroom, vroom. The noise was so big it hurt your ears, like thunder right next to you. They'd twist the handles on their bikes to make the engines roar even louder, trying to make Sarah jump or flinch. One time, they got so close the wind from their bikes blew her hair around. Dust flew up in her face, and the sound was deafening. Any normal person might have jumped or yelled, "Stop it!" But not Sarah. She didn't budge. She stood still, her hand on Rusty's harness, her face calm as ever. Then she'd start walking again, like the noise was just a little breeze. The bikers loved that game. "She's tough, huh?" one would say, grinning. "Let's see how loud we can get." They'd rev again and again, laughing every time. They thought she was pretending to be brave, that inside she was shaking. But they were wrong. Sarah wasn't scared. She was mad, super mad, but she kept it hidden, like a secret treasure buried deep. Then one day, Spike, the leader, took it way too far. Spike was the biggest and meanest of the Iron Vipers. He had a scruffy beard that looked like a bird's nest, and his hands were big and rough from riding his bike all the time. He wore a black leather jacket that creaked when he moved, and his boots left giant prints in the dirt. Spike wasn't happy just yelling or tossing cans. He wanted to do something big, something to really show Sarah who was boss. So he came up with a plan. It happened on a Saturday afternoon. Sarah was walking home from the store, her little bag swinging on her arm. She had some bread and a couple of apples inside, nothing fancy. Rusty was next to her, his tail wagging just a tiny bit, happy to be out in the sun. The street was quiet, with birds chirping and a soft wind blowing. Then the bikers showed up. Vroom. Their engines broke the peace, and Spike led the pack, his bike rumbling like a monster. He saw Sarah and grinned, his teeth yellow and crooked. Time for some fun, he muttered to his buddies. He sped up and parked his bike right in front of Sarah, blocking her path. The engine growled as he turned it off, and he jumped down, his boots hitting the ground with a loud thump. The other bikers stopped too, circling around like a wall of noise and leather. Spike stepped close, way too close, and leaned down toward Sarah. "Hey, blind lady," he said, his voice all rough and teasing. "What's wrong? You lost again." He laughed, a big, mean laugh that echoed down the street. Sarah didn't move. She stood there, her hand on Rusty's harness, her face still calm. Spike didn't like that. He wanted her to react, to yell or cry or something. So he did something really dumb. He reached out and snatched her cane right out of her hand. It was fast, like a snake grabbing its dinner. The cane was long and white, and Sarah used it to feel the ground when Rusty wasn't leading. Spike held it up high, waving it around like it was a prize he'd won. "Oops," he cackled, his voice loud and goofy. "Guess you'll need your doggy to find this now." Then he tossed it into the dirt a few feet away. It landed with a soft thud, rolling a little in the dust. The other bikers howled with laughter. "Good one, Spike," one shouted. "She's helpless now," another yelled. They slapped their knees and cheered, thinking they'd finally got her. They waited for Sarah to panic, to fumble around or beg for her cane back. But Sarah didn't panic. She didn't beg. She stayed cool as ice, cooler than ever. She tilted her head a tiny bit, like she was listening to the wind. Then she made a soft sound, a little whistle, so quiet you could barely hear it. "Rusty," she said, her voice steady and low. That's all it took. Rusty moved fast, but not in a crazy way. He walked over to the cane, his big paws quiet on the ground. His nose sniffed the dirt, and he found it right away. He picked it up in his mouth super gentle, like it was a toy he didn't want to break, and brought it back to Sarah. He dropped it right in her hand, smooth and easy, then sat down next to her again, his tail wagging just a little. The bikers stopped laughing for a second. They stared, their mouths open. Then Spike snorted. "Look at that," he said, pointing at Rusty. "Trained like a circus clown." The others cracked up again, even louder this time. "What a dumb dog," one yelled. "He's her little servant," another hooted. They thought it was the funniest thing ever. They didn't get it. They didn't see what was really happening. Sarah wasn't playing their game. She didn't care about their laughs or their tricks. She was watching them, or really, listening. Her ears caught everything. She heard every word they shouted, every cackle that came out of their mouths, every squeak of their boots as they shifted in the dirt. She heard the way Spike's voice got louder when he was mad, and the way the skinny biker's laugh sounded like a donkey. She heard the engines rumbling and the cans clanking and the dust settling. She didn't need eyes to know what was going on. She knew them better than they knew themselves. And Rusty? He was watching too. His big brown eyes followed every move they made. When they tossed a can, his ears twitched. When they revved their engines, his head tilted just a bit. When Spike grabbed the cane, Rusty's body got a little stiff, like he was ready to jump. But he didn't. He stayed calm, waiting for Sarah to tell him what to do. The bikers thought he was just a silly pet, a dog who fetched stuff like a trick pony. They had no idea who he really was. That night, after the bikers rode off, Sarah sat on her porch. The sun was gone, and the sky was dark, full of stars. The air was cool, and the town was quiet again. No engines, no shouting, just crickets chirping. Sarah rocked in her old wooden chair, the creak sound mixing with the night noises. Rusty lay next to her, his head on his paws, his fur soft under her hand. She reached down and petted him, running her fingers through his thick coat. "They think we're helpless, don't they, boy?" she whispered, her voice soft like a secret. Rusty lifted his head a little and let out a huff, a short, quiet sound, like he was saying, "Yup." Sarah smiled, just a tiny bit. She knew the truth, and so did Rusty. If those bikers knew it too, they'd be scared silly. They'd drop their soda cans and ride out of town so fast their bikes would leave skid marks. See, Rusty wasn't just any guide dog. He wasn't just a helper who fetched canes and walked nice. Before he came to Sarah, he'd done big things, crazy, brave things. He'd spent years with the Navy SEALs, the toughest soldiers around. He'd sniffed out danger, like bombs hidden in the dirt. He'd chased bad guys through dark places. He'd taken down trouble with his teeth and his smarts. Rusty was a hero, a real one, and the bikers had no clue. Sarah kept petting him, her hands slow and steady. "They'll find out soon," she whispered. Rusty huffed again, like he agreed. The night stayed quiet, but something was coming. The bikers didn't know it, but every mean trick, every loud laugh, every dumb shout, it was all building up. Sarah and Rusty were ready, and the truth was getting closer. It all happened on a Saturday night in Oakville. The air was cool, and the sky was dark, with shiny stars twinkling way up high. The little town was quiet, super quiet, like it was holding its breath. The crickets chirped a little, and the wind rustled the leaves on the trees, but that was it. Most folks were inside their houses, eating dinner or watching TV. The streets were empty, with just a few lights glowing from windows. Oakville felt peaceful, like it was ready to sleep. But then the Iron Vipers showed up, and everything changed. The bikers were louder than ever that night. Their big motorcycles roared through town like a thunderstorm on wheels. Vroom, vroom, vroom. The noise bounced off the houses and shook the ground, making dogs bark and kids peek out their curtains. The Iron Vipers didn't care about quiet. They didn't care about peace. They loved being loud and wild, and tonight, they were extra crazy. Their engines growled so big you could hear them from miles away. Their tires screeched as they turned corners, kicking up dirt and rocks. They zoomed down the main street, their leather jackets shining under the streetlights, the snake picture on the back looking extra scary in the dark. Spike, their leader, was in front, riding his huge black bike. His scruffy beard blew in the wind, and his eyes were small and mean, like a snake's. He grinned, showing his crooked teeth, and the other bikers followed him like a pack of wild dogs. There was the skinny guy with greasy hair, the short one with a loud laugh, and a few others, all tough, all noisy, all ready for trouble. They'd been picking on Sarah for weeks, yelling dumb stuff and tossing cans, but tonight was different. Tonight, Spike wanted to do something big. He wanted to really scare her, to show her who was boss. He had a plan, and it wasn't nice. They tore through town, looking for Sarah. They checked her porch, nope, she wasn't there. They zoomed past the store closed for the night. Then they spotted her, walking home on a quiet side street. She'd been to the corner store earlier, before it shut down, and now she was heading back to her little house. She had a small bag of groceries hanging from her arm, just some bread, a little milk, maybe an apple or two. Nothing fancy. She wore her usual blue dress and a light sweater, and her hair was tied back in a ponytail. Rusty, her big German shepherd, walked next to her, his shiny fur glowing a little under the streetlights. His tail wagged just a tiny bit, like he was happy to be with Sarah. They looked calm, like it was just another night. Spike saw them and grinned wider. "There she is," he muttered, his voice low and sneaky. "Time to have some fun." He raised his hand and waved it, signaling his crew. The bikers nodded, their eyes lighting up with trouble. They sped up, their engines roaring even louder, and zoomed toward Sarah. They didn't just ride past her this time. Nope. They circled her, like sharks swimming around a little fish. Their bikes went round and round, closing in tight. Vroom, vroom. The noise was huge, and dust flew everywhere, big clouds of it, swirling in the air, making it hard to see. The street lights flickered through the dust, and the bikers' shadows danced on the ground. Sarah heard them coming. She couldn't see the bikes or the dust, but she didn't need to. Her ears caught everything: the engines growling, the tires squeaking, the wind whooshing past. She stopped walking, her shoes still on the gravel. The bag of groceries swayed a little on her arm, and Rusty stopped too, his big paws planted firm. The bikers kept circling, tighter and tighter, their engines so loud it felt like the whole town would wake up. They wanted her to jump. They wanted her to run. They wanted her to freak out. Spike hopped off his bike, turning it off with a loud clunk. His boots hit the ground hard, thump, thump, and he walked toward Sarah, cracking his knuckles like he was getting ready for a fight. The other bikers stayed on their bikes, circling slow now, watching with big grins. Spike stepped closer, his shadow big and dark in the streetlight. He leaned down, right in Sarah's face, and yelled, "Lost again, blind lady." His voice was rough and loud, like he was trying to scare her silly. He laughed a big, mean laugh and kept going. "What's a girl like you doing out here all alone? Huh? No one to help you?" Sarah didn't move. She didn't answer. She stood there, calm as a rock, her hand resting on Rusty's harness. Spike didn't like that. He wanted her to shake or cry or yell back. So he got bolder. He pointed at Rusty, who was sitting still, his ears up and his eyes sharp. "That dog of yours," Spike said, smirking. "He's kinda cute. Maybe we should take him off your hands. He'd look good riding with us." He turned to his buddies and laughed again. "Right, boys. A biker dog. We'll put a little jacket on him." The other bikers cracked up, hooting and hollering. "Yeah, Spike," one shouted. "He can ride with me," another yelled. They closed in even more, their bikes rumbling low, like growling animals. Sarah still didn't budge. The dust settled a little, sticking to her dress and Rusty's fur, but she didn't care. She tilted her head, just a tiny bit, like she was listening to the wind or maybe to something far away. The bikers kept laughing, thinking they'd won, thinking she was scared inside even if she didn't show it. Spike stepped closer, so close his boots almost touched hers. He cracked his knuckles again, pop, pop, and grinned down at her. "What's the matter, sweetheart?" he said, his voice all teasing and mean. "Too scared to talk? Or you just waiting for your puppy to save you?" That's when it happened. Sarah didn't yell. She didn't cry. She didn't even flinch. She just spoke real calm, real quiet, like she was saying something normal. "Rusty," she said, her voice smooth as steel. "Protect." In a flash faster than you can blink, Rusty turned into a blur of fur and teeth. 1 second he was sitting still, all calm and quiet. The next, he was moving like lightning. He lunged at Spike, his big body flying through the air. Bam! He hit Spike hard, slamming him to the ground before the guy could even move. Spike went down fast, his back smacking the dirt with a loud thud. Dusty flew up around him, and his arms flailed like he didn't know what hit him. Rusty landed on top, his big paws pinning Spike's chest, his teeth bare just an inch from Spike's face. A growl came out of Rusty's throat, low and deep, loud enough to shake the air. Grrrrrrrr. It wasn't a little bark. It was a warning, a big one, like a lion telling you to back off. The other bikers froze. Their laughs stopped, like someone flipped a switch. Their mouths hung open, and their eyes got wide, super wide, like saucers. The bikes kept rumbling, but no one moved. They just stared, stuck in place, watching Rusty stand over Spike. Spike squirmed under Rusty's paws, his tough guy face gone. He looked scared now, really scared. "Get this mutt off me," he screamed, his voice high and shaky. He wiggled and kicked, trying to push Rusty away, but Rusty didn't budge. Those big paws stayed firm, and that growl kept going, grrrrrrr, like a motor that wouldn't quit. Sarah stepped forward, slow and steady. The dust crunched under her shoes, and the bag of groceries still hung on her arm, swinging a little. She stopped right next to Spike, her shadow falling over him. The bikers watched, holding their breath. She didn't yell or shout. She spoke again, her voice steady as steel, strong like a mountain. "He's not a mutt," she said, clear and loud so everyone could hear. "He's a retired Navy SEAL K-9. Trained to take down guys way tougher than you." The bikers' jaws dropped even more. Some gasped, like they'd just seen a ghost. Spike stopped squirming for a second, his eyes huge, staring up at Rusty. Sarah kept going, her words cutting through the night. "So here's the deal," she said. "Leave me alone, or Rusty finishes what he started." She didn't smile. She didn't laugh. She just stood there, calm and sure, like she meant every word. Spike whimpered under Rusty's paws, actually whimpered, like a little kid who'd lost his toy. Okay, he squeaked, his voice all wobbly. "Call him off. Please." The other bikers didn't move. They didn't laugh now. They didn't cheer. They just stared, their tough faces gone, replaced with shock. Rusty's growl softened a little, but he didn't move. His teeth stayed close to Spike's face, and his eyes locked on him, sharp and fierce. The truth hit the bikers like a big wave. They didn't know it, none of them did, but Rusty wasn't just some fluffy guide dog. He'd been a hero, a real one. Before he came to Sarah, he'd worked with the Navy SEALs, the toughest soldiers in the world. He'd sniffed out bombs hidden in the ground, big ones that could blow up whole buildings. He'd tracked bad guys through dark forests and sandy deserts, finding them when no one else could. He'd saved soldiers' lives, jumping into danger with his fast legs and sharp teeth. Rusty was strong, smart, and brave, way braver than any of those loudmouth bikers. A few tough guys on bikes? That was nothing to Rusty. He'd faced way worse and won every time. The Iron Vipers thought he was a joke, a circus clown who fetched canes. They were so wrong. Now they knew, and they couldn't believe it. Spike lay there in the dirt, his leather jacket all dusty, his tough act gone. The other bikers sat on their bikes, hands shaking a little, engines rumbling soft. Sarah stood tall, her voice echoing in their heads. "Leave me alone," she'd said. And they knew she wasn't kidding. The night went quiet again, except for Rusty's growl and Spike's whimpers. The stars twinkled above, and the dust settled slow. The bikers had pushed too far, and now they'd met the real Rusty and the real Sarah. Trouble was over for them, whether they liked it or not. The Iron Vipers didn't stick around long after Rusty took down Spike. Oh no, they didn't wait even a minute more than they had to. Spike was still on the ground, dirt all over his big black leather jacket, his scruffy beard full of dust. Rusty stood over him, growling low grrrrr like a warning that said, "Don't try anything funny." Spike's tough guy face was gone. His eyes were wide, and his hands shook a little as he tried to push himself up. He didn't look like a big, mean biker anymore. He looked like a kid who just dropped his ice cream and didn't know what to do. Sarah stood there, calm as ever, her voice still ringing in the air. "Leave me alone, or Rusty finishes what he started," she'd said. Those words hit Spike hard, like a punch to the stomach. He scrambled to his feet, slipping a little in the dirt, his boots kicking up more dust. Okay, he squeaked, his voice all high and wobbly. He didn't even try to act tough now. He just wanted to get away, far, far away from that growling dog and the lady who wasn't scared of him. Spike turned to his biker crew, who were still frozen on their bikes, mouths open like fish out of water. "Let's get out of here," he yelled, waving his arms like a crazy person. His voice cracked, and he ran to his bike, jumping on it so fast he almost fell off. The other bikers snapped out of their shock. The skinny guy with greasy hair revved his engine vroom, and the short one with the loud laugh spun his tires. They didn't laugh now, though. They didn't cheer or shout dumb stuff. They just wanted out. Their bikes roared to life, louder than ever, but this time it wasn't to scare anybody, it was to run. Vroom, vroom, vroom. They peeled out of town so fast you'd think their bikes were on fire. Tires screeched on the gravel, and big clouds of dust flew up behind them, like a storm chasing them away. They zoomed down the main street, past the corner store, past the old houses, past the gas station. The engines got quieter and quieter as they raced out of Oakville, until you couldn't hear them at all. The night went still again, just crickets chirping and the wind blowing soft. The Iron Vipers were gone for good. Sarah stood there a moment longer, her hand on Rusty's harness. The dust settled around her, sticking to her blue dress and Rusty's shiny fur. She tilted her head a little, listening to the silence, making sure the bikers were really gone. Then she patted Rusty's head, real gentle. "Good boy," she said, her voice soft and warm. Rusty stopped growling and wagged his tail, just a little, like he was saying, "All done." The bag of groceries still hung on her arm, swinging a bit, and she turned to keep walking home, like nothing big had happened. But something big had happened, something huge, and Oakville would never be the same. By morning, word spread fast. Oakville was a small town, and news traveled quicker than a bunny hopping through a field. The people who'd peeked out their windows the night before started talking. They told their neighbors, who told their friends, who told the old men at the store. "Did you hear?" they'd say, their eyes wide. "Sarah's dog took down Spike. Slammed him right to the ground." Others added, "She said he's a Navy SEAL dog. A real hero." The story grew bigger with every whisper, but the best part? It was all true. Everyone in Oakville knew now Sarah wasn't just some quiet blind lady. She was strong, tougher than anybody thought. And Rusty? He wasn't just a guide dog with a wagging tail. He was a hero, a big, brave hero who'd done amazing things before he came to town. People couldn't stop talking about it. The kids who rode bikes in the street acted it out, pretending to be Rusty jumping on Spike. Growling. "Take that," they'd yell, laughing as they fell in the dirt. The old ladies who sat on their porches nodded and said, "That Sarah, she's something special." Even the dogs in town seemed to bark prouder, like they knew one of their own had shown the bikers who's boss. The townsfolk started treating Sarah different after that, way different. Before, they didn't pay her much mind. She was just the new lady with the cane and the dog, someone who kept to herself. Some felt sorry for her because she couldn't see, but they didn't talk to her much. Now, oh, they couldn't wait to say hi. When Sarah walked to the store, people waved hello from their yards. "Morning, Sarah," they'd call, smiling big. "Hey, Rusty, you're a good boy." If she had her little bag of groceries, someone would run up and say, "Let me carry that for you." They'd take the bag and walk with her, chatting about the weather or the birds. One day, a lady named Mrs. Jenkins, she had gray hair and always wore flower dresses, came to Sarah's porch with a little plate of cookies. "These are for Rusty," she said, setting them down. "He deserves a treat after what he did." The cookies were peanut butter ones, crunchy and sweet, and Rusty sniffed them happily. Another time, a kid named Tommy, he was about 10, with messy brown hair, left a chew toy on the steps. "For Rusty," he shouted as he ran off, grinning. Soon, Sarah's porch had a little pile of goodies, bones, biscuits, even a ball, all for her big hero dog. Sarah didn't need their pity before, and she didn't want it now. She didn't like people feeling sorry for her just because she was blind. She'd been fine on her own, with Rusty by her side. But this was different. It wasn't pity, it was respect. The townsfolk didn't see her as weak anymore. They saw her as strong, brave, and smart. They saw Rusty as a champion, not just a helper. Sarah liked that. She didn't say much about it, she was still quiet, Sarah, but you could tell she felt good. Sometimes she'd nod back when people waved, or she'd say, "Thanks," in her soft voice when they brought treats. It made her feel like she belonged. As for the Iron Vipers, they never came back. Not once. After that night, when Rusty slammed Spike to the ground and Sarah told them the truth, they were done with Oakville. Maybe they found another town to bother, or maybe they just stayed away from places with tough dogs. Nobody knew for sure, and nobody cared. The old men at the store laughed about it over their card games. "Guess they figured Oakville ain't worth the trouble," one said, slapping the table. "That dog scared 'em silly," another added, chuckling. The kids on their bikes made up stories, saying the bikers were so scared they rode all the way to the moon. It was funny, but it was true. Oakville was free of them, and it felt great. Sarah and Rusty went back to their quiet life, like nothing wild had ever happened. They walked the streets again, same as always. In the mornings, Sarah would grab her cane or Rusty's harness, and they'd head to the store. She'd buy her bread and milk, and Rusty would wag his tail as they strolled home. In the afternoons, they'd sit on the porch, rocking in the old chair, creak, listening to the birds or the wind. The sun would shine on Rusty's fur, making it gleam, and Sarah would sip a glass of water or hum a little tune. It was peaceful, just the way they liked it. But every now and then, you'd catch something special. Sarah would smile, just a little smile, small and sneaky, and pat Rusty's head. "Good boy," she'd say, her voice warm like a hug. Rusty would wag his tail, thump against the porch, his big brown eyes looking up at her. He knew he'd done his job. He'd kept her safe, showed those bikers what's what, and made Oakville a better place. They didn't need big cheers or loud parties. That little moment, Sarah smiling, Rusty wagging, was enough. The town settled down too. The dust from the bikers' bikes was gone, swept away by the wind. The streets felt safer, like a big shadow had lifted. People went back to their routines, playing cards, riding bikes, baking cookies, but they didn't forget. They'd always remember the night Sarah and Rusty stood up to the Iron Vipers. It was a story they'd tell for years, passing it down like a treasure. That blind lady and her dog, they'd say, they're tougher than anybody. Justice was served, and it felt so good. The bikers who'd been mean for so long got what they deserved, a big scare and a fast ride out of town. Sarah, who'd been quiet and strong, got the respect she earned. Rusty, the hero dog, got treats and love from everyone. Oakville wasn't just a dusty little town anymore, it was a place where bullies lost and good guys won. And that was the best ending of all. So here's the thing, friends, listen up, because this is super cool to think about. Sometimes the people who look the weakest, the ones you might not notice or might think can't do much, are actually the strongest of all. Yep, it's true. Sarah and Rusty showed us that in a big, amazing way. Let's talk about it some more, because this story has so much to teach us, and it's stuff you can carry with you every single day. Think about Sarah for a minute. She couldn't see with her eyes. She was blind, and to some people like those mean Iron Vipers bikers, that made her seem weak. They saw her walking with her cane or her dog, Rusty, and they thought, oh, she's just a quiet lady who can't do anything tough. They judged her fast, like picking a book by its cover without even opening it. But Sarah didn't need eyes to see the world. Nope. She had something way better: heart and guts. Her heart was big, full of courage, and her guts were strong, like steel inside her. She didn't let those bikers scare her, even when they yelled and tossed cans and took her cane. She stayed cool, calm, and tough, every single time. And then there's Rusty. Oh boy, what a dog. He looked like just a regular guide dog to the bikers. They saw his shiny fur and his harness, and they laughed, calling him a mutt or a circus clown. They thought he was nothing special, just a fluffy pet who helped Sarah walk around. But Rusty had been through more than most people ever will, way more than those loud bikers could even dream of. He was a Navy SEAL K-9. That means he worked with the toughest soldiers, sniffing out bombs, chasing bad guys, and saving lives. He wasn't weak at all. He was a hero, a super strong dog with smarts and bravery packed into every bit of his furry body. When he jumped on Spike and growled, those bikers learned real quick they'd been so wrong about him. Now, let's think about those bikers, the Iron Vipers. They were big and loud, with their roaring bikes and tough leather jackets. They acted like they were the strongest, the bosses of Oakville, picking on Sarah because they thought she couldn't fight back. They judged her too fast, didn't they? They looked at her and Rusty and decided, easy target. But oh boy, did they learn the hard way. When you judge someone too quick, without knowing who they really are, you might just end up flat on your back like Spike did, squirming in the dirt with Rusty standing over him. That's a big lesson right there, friends. Don't be like those bikers. Don't think you know everything about someone just by looking at them. You might miss the strongest, coolest parts hiding inside. What's so awesome about this story is how it flips everything upside down. Sarah and Rusty seemed quiet and small to the bikers, but they were the real powerhouses. Sarah didn't need to shout or cry or run away. She had strength in her calm, steady way. Rusty didn't need to bark all the time. He saved his power for the perfect moment. Together, they showed that being strong isn't about being loud or big or mean. It's about knowing who you are and standing up when it counts. That's real strength, the kind that lasts. Let's imagine something fun for a second. Picture a little turtle, okay. Turtles aren't fast. They don't have sharp teeth or loud roars like lions. If you saw a turtle crossing the road, you might think, ah, he's so slow and weak. But guess what? Turtles carry their homes on their backs, those tough shells, and they keep going, step by step, no matter what. They don't give up. They're stronger than they look, just like Sarah and Rusty. Or think about a tiny seed in the ground. It's small, right? You could step on it and not even notice. But that seed can grow into a giant tree, tall and sturdy, pushing through dirt and rocks. Looks can trick you, friends, big time. So here's a question for you, what do you think? Could you stay as cool as Sarah? Picture those bikers circling you, yelling dumb stuff, tossing cans, laughing loud. Could you keep your face calm, your step steady, and not let them get to you? It's hard, right? Most people might yell back or run away or get super mad. But Sarah didn't. She waited, smart and patient, until the right moment. She let Rusty handle it when it was time. That's some serious coolness. Could you do that? Or would you let Rusty lose sooner, telling him, "Go get him," the first time the bikers got mean? There's no wrong answer, it's just fun to think about. Let's talk about you for a minute. Maybe you felt small sometimes, like you're not strong or brave enough. Maybe someone's laughed at you or said you can't do something big. Guess what? You've got strength inside you, just like Sarah and Rusty. It might not be loud or showy, but it's there. Maybe it's in the way you keep trying, even when stuff's hard. Maybe it's in how you help a friend or stand up for what's right, even if you're scared. You don't need to see everything or be the loudest kid around to be strong. You've got your own heart and guts, and that's enough. Here's another cool thing to think about: dogs like Rusty teach us stuff too. Dogs don't care about how loud you are or what you look like. They just love you and stick by you. Rusty didn't care that Sarah couldn't see, he saw her, the real her, and he was her best buddy. He didn't need to prove anything to those bikers until it mattered. He waited, watched, and then bam, he showed them what he could do. You can be like that too. You don't have to show off all the time. Just be you, and when the moment comes, let your strength shine. This story got my heart racing. Friends, did it get yours? I bet it did. All that dust, those roaring bikes, Rusty jumping on Spike, it's like a movie in your head, right? Sarah and Rusty are the heroes we cheer for, the ones who win without being mean or loud. That's why I love this tale. It's about the good guys coming out on top, not by fighting dirty, but by being smart and brave. If it made your heart beat fast or your eyes light up, give it a big thumbs up. Tell a friend about it too. Say, "Hey, you gotta hear the story about a lady and her dog who scared off some bikers." Spread the fun, because good stories are even better when you share them. Let's wrap this up with one more thought, something to carry with you. The world's full of people like the Iron Vipers, who judge fast and act mean because they think they're big shots. But it's also full of Sarah's and Rusty's, quiet, strong folks who surprise you with what they can do. Be like Sarah. Be like Rusty. Don't let anyone tell you you're weak just because you're different or quiet or small. You've got power inside you, waiting for the right time to shine. And when it does, oh boy, watch out, world. So what do you think, friends? Drop your ideas in the comments, I'd love to hear them. Could you stay cool like Sarah, or would you sick Rusty on those bikers faster? Have you ever surprised someone by being stronger than they thought? Tell me everything. And if this story made you smile or cheer, hit that thumbs up and pass it on. See you next time for more awesome tales. Bye for now.